Susie,
Rob,
so today I want to talk to you all about teeth and vertebrates and invertebrates. So, do you think you could tell the difference between a vertebrate and invertebrate if I gave you a fossil of one?
I feel like I probably could. I mean, there's some critical differences between them, like, the presence of a backbone and stuff.
Actually, interesting point. Is it about a backbone or not? Or is it actually mostly about teeth? Because that's what it's going to boil down to, I think, a story of teeth. Now,
Interesting. Okay.
you're normally the pun master. Are you ready for a tooth joke?
Yeah, all right. Hit me with a tooth joke, Rob.
Are you primed? Because this is bad.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm
You're,
ready.
you're
Go.
right. Okay. All right. All right. What time is it when you have a toothache?
I don't know, what time is it?
Tooth hurty. I'm
Yeah, no, it's
ashamed
quite
of
bad.
myself.
It's
I'm
quite bad.
ashamed. I'm
Yeah.
ashamed. So, Susie, what have you been up to this week?
I have been playing a lot of cricket and writing a lot of papers, Rob. How about you?
That's good. I've been watching the children play cricket whilst failing to write papers. I've been in Portsmouth to examine a PhD viva this week. That was fun. That was a big adventure.
Oh, it was in Portsmouth. I saw you put a tweet of Pop World on
Yeah.
yeah, on Blue Sky.
Yeah, not
That's
a
good.
tweet. No, don't slander me with that though. It
What are
wasn't
they
wasn't
called
an
on Blue
X.
Sky? The people
I,
call them skeets, but I don't like that.
ugh,
Yeah,
ugh. We
yeah.
need a better verb than that.
Can we just say a
To,
message? A post. A
a
post on
post.
Blue Sky. There we
You
go.
posted. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that was fun. It's quite nice. I always enjoyed being acting as an external examiner it's a lot of work, right? It takes days and it can be quite hard. But the actual moment itself when you're down there, it's quite special to shake someone's hand and say, "Congratulations, doctor." It's nice.
Yeah, it is. It is good. Oh, that's
Um,
nice. That's fun. I'm
that
actually
was
Portsmouth's external examiner for their BSc course. So
they've got so
yeah,
many paleontologists there.
they have 60 first years on their
I
paleontology course. It's
they're doing
amazing.
specifically paleontology. I don't know
Yeah.
how they get that. Anyway, that's devolving into thinking about the state of UK paleontology education, which may be a separate podcast. But so, Susie, I promised to talk to you about invertebrates because we've done vertebrates so far. And we're still a long way off from doing a plant. But anyway, we will get to a plant at some point. But I've ended up coming up with an invertebrate paper that's actually about vertebrates. So I'm feeling a bit bad about this. So we're going to see how it goes.
Right, I'm going to put my hands up here, Rob, and say that
Yeah.
I only made it halfway through the paper before we started talking. This is largely your fault, though, because you
This
only
is my
told me that
fault.
we were
This is
doing
my
this
fault.
paper yesterday afternoon.
Yes,
So,
this is not. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. This is
so I
not a
haven't read it
reflection
all.
on you. This is because of my poor admin. That's why. So this is the paper this week is The Origin of Vertebrate Teeth and the Evolution of Sensory Exoskeletons by Yara Haridi in Chicago, along with a lot of other authors from the USA, including the last author, Neil Shubin, who in the news, so Neil Shubin of Tiktaalik fame, I think he's Yara's one of Yara's PhD supervisors. Do they call them supervisors? They call them advisors in the UK, in the US, don't they? And he recently became elected as the president of the National Academy of Sciences in the US. So that's a big news.
That's big
That's,
news. I did see that. Yeah.
yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Tiktaalik is a very famous transitional fossil that a vertebrate that moved out on land. So he's quite famous. He's written books. But if he's president of the National Academy of Sciences, that he's managing all sciences in the US, and as we mentioned, as you mentioned in a couple of episodes ago, it's a tricky time in the US for science. So I'm wishing him well in that job.
Good to have a paleontologist in that role, though. I wonder
Yeah,
whether he's the first paleontologist who's occupied that role.
he is. As far as the
Is he?
headlines I could see without having actually read the articles properly, which is, very much the
Standard.
nature of social media. As far as I could tell, he was the first paleontologist ever to be as head of the National Academy of Sciences. We're getting off topic. Let's talk about vertebrates and invertebrates. So, this is a bit of a tricky topic for me because this is very close to my own research. So I've got to be careful not to talk about 16 hours about conodont histology, which I will try and avoid.
Thanks.
Susie, can I ask you how much did so you're a vertebrate biologist, right? But I mean, most
Paleontologist. Yeah. I wouldn't describe
paleontologists,
myself
sorry,
as a biologist. Yes.
sorry, apologies. You're a vertebrate paleontologist, and most vertebrate paleontologists work on, dinosaurs, mammals, that sort of thing. Some work on fish occasionally, but do many of them ever think about the origin of vertebrates? Is that if I asked you what your current thought about the origin of vertebrates was, what would you say?
Yeah, I got nothing. I'd ask you actually. You
You'd
would be
ask
the
me.
person I came to
I
ask about the origin of vertebrates.
I'm glad about that.
It's well, well, well down the, the tree, isn't it?
It is,
For
yeah.
by my standards. So, but actually, the fossil that this is describing, I think I have heard of before. So at least
Oh,
that's a
yeah?
start. That's a
Yeah.
start. Yeah, I think I had heard of it.
So origin of vertebrates, where did our group come from? The Cambrian is, we're now talking about the Cambrian. That's the time frame we're talking about. The Cambrian explosion was about 500 million years ago. That's when most groups, big groups, started out, right? There was a long period of stasis of not a lot happening. Well, I say not a lot happening. Stuff was happening. I don't want to dismiss the Ediacaran, but there was a
The
mad stuff
evolution of
happening.
multicellular life and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also the building of today's atmosphere. Nothing like
Well,
nothing important. Yeah. Anyway, and then in the Cambrian, we've got suddenly all these different animal groups turning up, all these different animal phyla, vertebrates, invertebrates, a massive diversity of them. Now, the question with vertebrates is that we've got lots of rich data from the Cambrian for invertebrates. For vertebrates, it's much more tricky for our own group. We've got some, that's because we're dealing with soft-bodied things for the most part, which don't have a skeleton. And then the things that do evolve a skeleton have not been without controversy, which is where we get to this is where this paper comes into it, because vertebrates are split into jawless vertebrates and jawed vertebrates. So we are jawed vertebrates, as are everything else you can think of mostly, apart from the two archaic clingers on, the lampreys and hagfish. Now, this is where I've got to be careful because I love lampreys and hagfish and I work with them and I could talk about them for ages.
uh,
Maybe now's the time to admit my shameful past publicly. It's finally time to deal with this. So, is this the right forum to publicly say? I guess it is. Anyway, I was in Sweden doing some work on hagfish because I couldn't get a hold of them in the UK. And these hagfish, they've got no bones. They've just got cartilage heads. They're blind and they create a lot of slime, as I'm sure you're aware. And they tie themselves in knots. So when I was trying to handle them, one of them escaped down the plug hole at the marine biology station, and I didn't tell anybody. I just left it.
how
I
big
just
are
left it.
they?
They can be about, I don't know, 30 centimeters. They can get quite
Okay.
long, but
Yeah.
because they're so slippery, they've evolved to do that. I was like, whoop, there it goes.
And what do you think happened to it? Would he have just disappeared off down the sewers?
Let's hope so.
It's probably
Or,
just happily living in some sort of reservoir in Sweden.
so he was fine. He's going to be okay. He's good.
Okay. Or dead.
Or dead. Well, he's certainly dead now. This was a few years ago. Anyway, I've done it now. That's it. That's out there for the public to know. Anyway, so we've got all these. We've got some. Most vertebrates that have these bony, hard tissues like skeletons and teeth, and there are these soft ones. So when it comes to the fossil record, the soft ones are quite tricky. We've got some of them from the Burgess Shale, some of them from Xinjiang in China. But this
I have a
paper is all
question.
about.
Can I ask a
Go for
question
it.
before we go
Go for it.
further? So, vertebrate,
Yeah.
I mean, that suggests a backbone.
Yes.
Um, but you just said lampreys don't have any bones.
Correct.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I can, but it gets to quite an arcane question that but they don't have bones, but they do have a little cartilaginous thing running along their back, their dorsal nerve cord. So there's lots of things that make a vertebrate, not just the vertebrae, right? It's that there are lots of things that we now focus a lot more on the soft tissue things. So we're called vertebrates because of the vertebrae, but there are lots of other things like our brains and our immune systems and all sorts of things. But lampreys, and also the other thing that we're beginning to realize is that hagfish might be secondarily basic. We used to think that hagfish was
Yeah.
some archaic thing, but they've become slimy weirdos because they live at the bottom of the sea and burrow into whales' anuses and things like that. That's their MO. And if you do that, you don't need all those sorts of things. Let's not shame
Okay.
them.
So all vertebrates, hang on, all things with vertebrae are vertebrates, but not all vertebrates have vertebrae.
Yes.
Okay. Carry
And
on. Sorry.
that's gonna be my short answer. I could give you a much longer answer, but we could be
Don't.
here all
No, that's
day.
fine. That's fine.
No, no, no. Okay, so the jaw bones, but where do these tissues and bones come from? The skeleton, most of the time we're looking at teeth. Teeth is where things get started. Now, that's an interesting story in and of itself, is that where did our skeleton come from first of all? Was it just cartilage inside that got made hard or mineralized? Well, actually, the current thinking is that we were covered in uh, like dermal skeleton. These early vertebrates that had the first bones were basically like tanks. So this massively heavily armored things. And then those sorts of they're covered basically in teeth, and those teeth migrated in and then became our body and skeleton, which is a slightly alarming thought that basically these early fish were just a bag of teeth walking, swimming around. That's a way to
But
characterize it.
But their bone, the first bone, you said is dermal bone, so it's
Yeah.
bone in the skin. So
Yeah.
the first bone
Yes.
was actually there wasn't an internal skeleton; they were actually exoskeletons. They were external skeletons,
Yes.
and
That's the
then they
current
were just
understanding.
all soft and squidgy inside, and they just had this exoskeleton.
That's the current understanding that could be overturned, and it depends on what kind of phylogeny you look at. But that's before anyone starts atting me, that is the rough oversimplification, I would say. Yeah. So then we start looking for these little bits of bone, and the earliest bits of bone for a long period of time, and the earliest definitive bits of bone and vertebrates and teeth was this thing called Anatolepis. So Anatolepis was this taxon found in Cambrian, Australia, Spitsbergen, all sorts of places, Ordovician as well. There was a bit of back and forth in the 90s about whether it was or was not a vertebrate, but the most recent papers basically it's definitively a vertebrate. Okay, that's great. Now, why is it so difficult to figure out if it is or isn't a vertebrate? Is because you're often dealing with the tiny scraps, right? The way you analyze this material is you get this large amount of sandstone, you acid prep it out, and you end up with these tiny little fragments. You wouldn't know what the body of the thing looked like, but you can look at the lovely histology of the tissues and say, okay, this has the right things that make it a vertebrate. And those things include odontodes. Now, at the risk of asking you a very direct question, do you know what an odontode is?
Well, I'm guessing it's something to do with teeth because odont is
Yes.
odonts,
Yeah,
teethy
that's
for
right. Yeah.
Latiny teethy thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So these are
But no, I don't.
dermal teeth. Yeah, there's the ones on the outside. So these on the external structure, they're hard things. They've got a soft pulp surrounded by dentine. So dentine is the important bit here, the particular type of tissue inside your teeth. And they can also be covered with enamel.
Hmm.
So they're similar to teeth, but they're not actually teeth. They're on the outside. So these are a really key vertebrate tissue. They need neural crest to be part of things. Oh, I'm not going to go on about neural crest. That's too much. So that's when these little tissues of Anatolepis were looked at, they were found these particular structures that made them think they were vertebrates, and therefore this would be the earliest evidence of our skeleton, many, many, many moons ago, right? And there's a big gap between that and anything else, and it's in the Cambrian. That makes sense. All the other vertebrates in the Cambrian are basically soft, squishy things.
What about
Um,
conodonts?
well, I was kind of unsure, and when I was preparing my notes for this, I wasn't sure whether to go into conodonts because conodonts are a confusing, noisy side story. But maybe we should talk about conodonts.
Well,
You've asked me, so maybe I
I've
will have
asked you.
to.
I mean, to me, if that they have always kind of been this. They've got teeth, haven't they? Haven't they got teeth?
Yes, so
They've got jaw
conodonts.
elements.
I'll try and do the condensed version of the story. Conodonts are these tiny little microfossils that are like little triangles. They've been known about for a long time, from the Cambrian and above. There was You can get some really nice information about their histology, cut them up. There's a lot of people that are doing that. They're used a lot for, serious purposes like biostratigraphy, chronology, trying to identify rocks and things like that. But it was only in the 90s that we figured out they were actually belonging to some vertebrate-like organism. Notice how I said vertebrate-like, because this actually ends up being quite controversial. Some of the people involved in these debates got really het up about the whole thing. We all thought this was solved in the noughties, and that was done and solved. And we said, yeah, this codons things, these tiny little teeth, they have phosphatic elements in it that look like maybe they're enamel, and they have a squishy eel-like body behind them. Great, they're vertebrates. And they're maybe on our evolutionary lineage. I've put them in some of my own phylogenies. That seems to make sense. But some of the more recent papers have said that there might be something convergent going on there. So whether or not they're vertebrates proper is unknown. And in this paper from Yara Haridi and friends, they say conodonts, we've kind of got a question mark over them. So I think there's a big unsolved thing with conodonts. We thought it was solved in the noughties, but I think there's more work to be done. Got to be careful about what I say now because my old PhD supervisor is very much Phil Donahue. He's very much in this debate. He won't be listening. I
He's
don't
not
have
going
to
to be
worry
listening
about
rubbish fire. He's
he
far too
won't be
busy to
listening.
listen. Yeah.
He'll be busy writing about 16,000 grants and doing all this other stuff. Don't have to worry about that. Oh, and being our Paleontological Association president, he's busy doing
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the context that we're dealing with. We've got these tiny little bony bits in the Cambrian and Ordovician. So this is where Yara Haridi and friends comes in. She and her colleagues, I don't know what the colleagues were mostly involved in. I've only ever spoken to Yara about it. She does great talks about this. She's very compelling. She's a great speaker.
She
She does
is.
lots of public outreach stuff as well as her science, which is also excellent.
Isn't she
She
a Pallas Distinguished Lecturer? this
She
year?
is our Pallas Distinguished Lecturer, so she could be coming to a campus near you. Keep an eye out for
Mhm.
that, or ask for that if I ever get around to organizing that. So yeah, so she's a great speaker. Um, so she took all these little tiny bits and pieces to the synchrotron. Now, we mention? We haven't mentioned synchrotrons before, have we?
I don't think so.
No. So it's a really high-powered X-ray analysis. Is based again, I'm going to do myself a disservice by mis explaining it and getting people angry with me. But it basically is very, very, very high-powered X-rays and a sort of particle accelerator type thing. You blast your specimens with it, and you can get really, really, really fine detail about the internal tomography of things. I mean, the alternative in the past was just to slice it up and look at it under the scanning electron microscope and look at two-dimensional slices. That was where a lot of this work used to be done for histology purposes. But she took it to the synchrotron, got it blasted,
Have you
and
been
the
to the
important.
synchrotron, Rob?
I've not been. I mean, I've got lots of synchrotron data that I work with on other people. But I've not been myself. Have you?
I have. I went last summer, this time
No,
last year actually, to the
which one?
ESRF, to the one in Grenoble in France. So there's one in
Oh, right, yeah,
Grenoble, and then
yep,
there's the Diamond Light Source, which is in the UK. And the one in
yes,
Grenoble is slightly easier for paleontologists because they actually have a beamline set up specifically for paleo and the sorts of tissues and the sorts of
mm,
bone and things that we're interested in. And we
yeah,
put a load of vertebrae to look for tissue types
excellent.
that I'm not going to talk about because it's exciting and I haven't published it yet. But anyway,
Is it on
um,
vertebrate? Your vertebrates we're talking about here, I guess.
we are talking about vertebrates. Yeah, it was on Archosaur bones. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's super cool and it's super fun.
Hmm.
And you have to work, but it runs 24 hours, so you have to stay up all night,
Yeah.
and sort of change your experiment every, 40 minutes or 2 hours or however long it lasts. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really hard work, but really fun.
I may go and get involved in some of that. Well, we've been working with the Stanford synchrotron people there,
Ah,
that involved me shipping the specimens over to California and people that are far more clever than me doing the actual analyses. Okay, so they've scanned these things. They've got the tiny itty bitty bits, but the important thing that they've done is not just done their Atelepis. They've done it in comparison to some bona fide vertebrates and a wide range of invertebrates. This is where it gets
bona fide.
cool.
Do you see what you did there?
Oh God, I hate puns, and I've wandered into a pun. Bona fide
Should
vertebrates
have
and
you
some
should have
bo
you could have rocked that one.
I no, I'm denying it. So and then the and some invertebrates. Now they didn't just do some invertebrates. There's loads of invertebrates, which is pretty impressive. Fossil and extant ones. Now one of the key ones that they compared it to was some aglaspids. Now aglaspids, I'm assuming our listeners won't know what those are, and probably you don't know either. They are. Am I casting aspersions on your knowledge of
Absolutely not. No.
obscure? Yeah, yeah. I've spent a long time learning all these obscure Cambrian arthropods, and it annoys me because there's so many of these weird groups. Anyway, aglaspids, sorry, are a sort of they look like a trilobite basically. They're very closely related to a trilobite, but they're not a trilobite. That's the end of that. If you take a trilobite and made it look dumb, that's what they look like. So they are arthropods. They're closely related to trilobites. So they have a mineralized skeleton, which is also phosphatic. That's the other thing. Like whether or not you have a skeleton with phosphate in it is an important thing. And I'm not going to go into the details of exactly all the tubules and whatnot, but they ended up demonstrating quite clearly that the Anatolaspis, this one that they thought was a vertebrate, actually ends up being very, very, very much like aglaspids and invertebrates and arthropods in particular. So really, this thing that we were using as the key step on being the first step of our bones and teeth turns out to be an invertebrate all along. So we are doing
That's a super,
invertebrates here.
super cool result, hey? I think
Yeah,
that's
it is.
really interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, what a massive step that they've made
Yes.
there. It's
It took me
huge.
a long time to get to the point there. That's the whole point. Um, but
Yeah,
that's
but
the
we can
spoiler
finish now.
alert.
That's it. That's the
No,
end.
yeah, done. Yeah, anyway. So well, there's other implications to do with sensory apparatus and convergent evolution, but we'll come to that. But let's talk about the implications first of all of that being an invertebrate or a vertebrate. There's this other thing from Australia which has never had a name, which I'm not going to talk about. Which is again, I don't know if it's gone. Here's a question for you about. Oh, I don't know. With these little tiny bits of fossily bits, they get lost. Right? I was looking through the methods and materials. They were trying to look at the original material. They couldn't find it. Unreturned loans they talked about, which relates to our conversation about private specimens, I guess. Anyway, so
Oh
they've went and
dear.
found their own material and scanned it. But with this Anatolepis, and this other Australian thing eliminated, basically, because this Australian thing looks a lot like this arthropod. That means that 40 million years is now we have to leap before we get to the proper bona fide vertebrates.
That's a
So
long
in the
time. 40
it's
million
a
years
long
is a
time.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And in our previous episodes, we've talked about how paleontology is often, the point of a paper is new thing found, pushes back this by this amount. And we did that with the synapsid trackway that pushed things back by, X millions of years. But that's always how things normally work. This is unusual because it's pushing things backwards instead, or forwards. We've now got this interesting question about what vertebrates were up to before that. Um, we don't know. It's quite possible that our skeletons came a lot later than everything else. Because we have some soft-bodied vertebrates, which I work on, um, but the bony ones, we have to wait until the Ordovician for it to happen. So one of the other side stories with this is sensory stuff. When they went and looked at these bona fide vertebrates in the Ordovician, they found these nerves and sensory structures to look different, and those sensory nerve structures in these external bits of teeth and bone on the outside of the body communicated with the outside. So their suggestion was that the evolutionary pressure was to have this nice dermal skeleton to protect you, is possibly what's going on, but also that the nerves are going right up to the surface, potentially detecting, I don't know, temperature, water salinity, all sorts of stuff. And other organisms are convergently evolving this at the time as well. So all these sensory structures all over the place, and crabs and arthropods and crustaceans and vertebrates, convergent evolution, and ultimately where your teeth come from. That was where some of the public outreach of this was going for, and why we did the toothache
Well, this is the
at the
thing that
beginning.
I was going to say. So that actually, because I mean, teeth aren't, they're not that good at their purpose, are they? I mean, if we think about our teeth, like they wear down over time, and
Yep.
you don't realize this when you're young. Some of our listeners will probably be students and think, "What do you mean your teeth wear down?" But you and I, being in our mid 40s, Rob, can probably assure them that your teeth actually wear down, and they start to run out, and then you
Look
get
after your teeth,
look
listeners.
after your teeth, kids. But then you get then they get sore bits. Like
Yes.
what if you actually just want something that just bites stuff? Why does it hurt? Why isn't it just solid enamel? And is this the reason? This is the reason that we get toothache, is
Yeah.
because
Well, that.
originally, our teeth actually they're not designed as teeth. They're not designed as
Mhm,
biting structures. They were designed as
mhm.
sensory structures that have been co-opted
Yes.
to function in grinding and chewing and slicing and biting. That's
Yes.
super cool.
Exactly.
That's a super
So
cool finding.
it's super cool. So 500, 400 million years ago, you would have been swimming around with basically without any teeth because you would have been jaw. You wouldn't have had a jaw. You would have just been uh, covered in dermal skeleton, which is what was made of dentine with these sensory structures in it. And they've, over evolutionary time, migrated into the mouth and then become ultimately your teeth. So dentine and enamel didn't start out in a mouth as a chomping, biting thing. They started out on the outside of the body, protecting you and being sensory structure. Now, the other one, we have enamel capping it, but if the enamel goes, then you get horrible, horrible toothache indeed, because the nerves are now exposed. I mean, that's not quite why they evolved, but you'd have thought that evolution would have caught up 400 million years later. But
Obviously not.
I
Um,
wonder.
can I ask a side question
Yes,
that has always puzzled me?
yes,
How do jawless fishes eat with no jaws? Do they just have tubes that they sort of suck?
yes. That's
Oh,
the short
okay.
answer. Well, it depends if you're a lamprey or if you're a hagfish. So, hagfish, let's start with lampreys because they're cute and I like them. Some of them have,
Cute. When you say
yeah,
cute, though, how
yes,
cute is a lamprey? I
yes.
mean, compared to, say, I don't know, a puppy or one of those baby woolly bullies, like those baby Scottish cows, they're the cutest things. That's
Forget the
surely,
cows. Lampreys are cute. They just want to come up to you and give you a little kiss and then take your blood.
eh,
Uh, so they have like a disc at the front of their thing, and they
their
will
thing,
attach
their
onto
head.
surfaces that
Okay.
yeah. That's the hangover catching up with them. So these eels they're vampires. These lampreys they will attach to you and they'll suck your blood and they have these little horrible keratinous teeth. So they don't have. That's the other thing that I should have mentioned is that the lampreys and hagfish they don't have bony teeth like you and I. They have teeth made of keratin like our hair and nails. So they've basically got nails inside their mouth. Now that I'm saying it, it's now sounding less cute. These things will
Yeah,
suck your
these things
blood.
are super cute, Rob. It's the definition of cute.
Whereas hagfish, on the other hand, are disgusting. They're pink, slimy. They got these they'll rasp at you. So they're not cute in the sense they'll come and give you a kisses. They'll bite you and uh,
Okay, but
take away bits.
that's the extant jawless fish. What about these what are they called? I'm going to
Ostracoderms.
say ostracoderms. Is that right? Yeah, the
Yeah.
ostracoderms.
So the ostracoderms is what I work on
Yeah.
some of the time. Well, a lot of the time, I guess, which is these wide range of heavily armored jawless fish. So there's nothing like it alive today. What did they feed? That's actually quite a difficult
Well,
topic.
how? How did they feed?
How?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of work on heterostracans recently. Some team from Birmingham and Bristol, they're both working in that problem. There's debates about whether or not they were just filter feeding or whether
Ah.
they were sort of scraping things up from the surface. So you can do different ways of doing that. That seems to be an ongoing issue, although I don't want to pick a camp just yet. Um, I will be hopefully advertising a PhD on this topic soon, but not on the
Well,
feeding, but
that sounds cool.
on
Okay.
heterostracans. So yeah, fossil files listeners, tune in. You can join the party on these fossil fishies, trying to
So
reconstruct their
basically,
anatomy.
it was scrape and gulp or filter and gulp. There's none of this.
Well, there is some
Well,
debate about
by
whether they were
this, by the
biting.
way,
Yeah,
because this is
yeah.
ultimately a podcast, of course, I'm making a chewing action with my hands.
Yeah, we will have to learn that people don't see us when we're
Mime is
talking.
problematic.
So there's not a lot of chomping going on, no. But this is one of the interesting things about this particular topic we've done is that there's quite a lot of unanswered questions here that need figuring out. Conodonts, we thought they were figured out. They're not quite figured out. We need to figure those out. What these all these sensory structures they need figuring out. How these things were feeding that needs figuring out. I think how they were protecting themselves also needs figuring out. One of the other things I wanted to mention in this, and that now we can. I was going to say it. I'm literally sat in an armchair, so I can do armchair speculation. This is armchair speculation. The best bit is that all these organisms were evolving this heavily armored protection in the Cambrian. It must have been pretty dicey to be swimming around in the Cambrian if you want to have, fish. The jawless fish today don't have all this heavily armored head shield to keep them protected, but it seemed to be absolutely necessary at the time. And arthropods too. All these arthropods with these heavily phosphatized shields. But
So what
here's the
was eating
question.
them? What was doing the eating? There's no jawed vertebrates to do the chomping. So
Nope.
presumably it was other invertebrates.
Yep.
Was
So
it things like,
Anomalocaris, like this
yeah,
big arthropod, is
anomalocaris?
often portrayed doing this, but actually some of the studies have indicated it wouldn't have been strong enough to do it. So it might have been protection from boring, potentially. Maybe something like a mollusk will crawl on top of you and bore into you. Who knows? That's an interesting topic. I want to get into the Cambrian predation.
Mm.
What was going on? Because that could be a simple question. Like all ecosystems have things eating them, but actually they don't. In the Cambrian, that was the big change, right? And that was what led to the explosive diversity and diversification potentially. Is that changed life forever when the things started eating other things
I've
and
actually
getting.
also been doing a little bit of work on islands and island forms and island faunas, and
Yeah.
actually islands are quite often characterized by a lack of carnivores as well. So
Oh, that's interesting. Or is
actually,
that?
yeah.
But that's just because there's not enough things to eat, presumably.
They're impoverished, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why you get like giant dormice and tiny elephants and things like that because there's nothing
Yeah.
eating them. So those sorts of pressures are, that keep them small so that they can hide away and burrow, or keep you big so
Hmm.
you don't get eaten. They've gone, so they get
Yeah,
tiny or
if
enormous
I'm
or
a
whatever.
wolf, I need a massive range and I need to eat a certain number of bison per day. And if I live on Malta, I'm gonna,
Well, also you've got to get there though as well, right?
that's
So,
true.
if the
Yeah.
island is basically has nothing on, you've got to get there. So
Hmm.
I guess the carnivores are less good at swimming or something. So
Yeah. But in the Cambrian, we're dealing with oceans mostly. So,
yes, yes, yes.
there's no, we don't have to worry about, I should have mentioned that. We're dealing for the first, however many hundreds of million years, we're dealing with all evolution happening in the seas. There's no talk of land, and there's very little talk of freshwater, actually. It's mostly in the seas is where things first, started diversifying and getting going. So that's the fishy story to present to you. Oh wait,
Or
I
the
didn't.
non-fishy story,
Or
really,
the
the arthropod
non-fishy story
story.
to mention to you.
I thought this was a
Um,
cool paper, Rob. I had missed it when it came out. I'm really glad that you brought it to my attention because it was super interesting.
Good. I'm glad. One of the things that I often try and think about is that what are the lessons we've learned from this afterwards?
Well, I think it's next time I have a toothache, I will know who to blame it on.
Yep,
Our Cambrian relatives.
yep. I don't think we can place the blame entirely on them. I think it's a nice example of how, well, I think for me, this raises a whole bunch of questions about what was going on for those 40 million years. Um, where are all the soft body ones? What are they up to? I guess that in some ways I could use this to strengthen my, the rationale for my own research. If I'm studying these soft ones, I could make the case that you have to go and study these soft ones to figure out what's going on, but they are quite rare. Also, I want to know about what's going on in the Cambrian. Who's eating what, and what, if we're getting all these sensory apparatus, are we doing it to escape predation?
Mm,
Who's getting eaten by whom and how?
yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. With
Um,
these sorts of ecosystems that are, fundamentally different to marine ecosystems today, is that kind of
yeah,
ecological structure the same? Are we still seeing kind of the same guilds, feeding guilds and
absolutely.
things like that?
Yeah. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that, Susie. It sounds like you did.
Yeah,
I
it was
have
really
tried
good.
to
Really enjoyed it.
I've tried to bring you invertebrates, and I brought you vertebrates, but then the vertebrates turned out to be invertebrates. So we've gone about around in a circle. Um, what are you gonna? Have you got an idea about what we're gonna do next time?
Yes, we're going to do vertebrates again. Sorry.
That's allowed. That's allowed and encouraged.
It's a cool one, though. It's a cool one. It's a paper that came out this week. So,
Oh, is
yeah,
this the Triassic Punk?
it's the Triassic Punk.
Okay, spoiler alert: Triassic Punk's coming your way. I look forward to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Good.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
Okay,
See you, Susie.
good. See you. Bye bye.
The Fossil Files was presented by Robert Sansom and Susanna Maidment. You can find more information, including links to the original papers that were discussed, at fossils.libsyn.com, and you can contact us at fossilfiles.pod@gmail.com.